We have just talked about the iValue converter interface and how it's going to help us convert something that is in the model to something that has to be in the view, but it's not necessarily in the proper format. So in this lecture, we're going to implement the interface and start displaying something in a correct format. And you may be thinking, why are we on the Azure portal? Well, it turns out that the thing that I want to display is the date in which the posts were added. We're currently in the history page only displaying the experience. But now I also want to display the date and do something very similar to what I mentioned in one of the examples in the previous lecture. That is to display the date, but not as a date format. Sometimes I'm going to display an hour ago, 2 hours ago, a week ago maybe. Unfortunately, we do not need to change anything while we are posting. We don't need to repost everything again, but this time adding the date time. When we insert it into the database, this was already added for us. One of the columns that were added automatically is the created ad column, and this contains the date in which the post was created. Now currently we are not getting this information because our model does not have it. But what we can do is copy the exact same name that we have inside of the Azure portal and create back in Visual Studio a new property inside of the post table that has the exact same name that this column and has the same type that this column. So here I am back in Visual Studio, and the first thing is to open the post class and in here define a new property. Notice that we already have all of these properties, but we are lacking the property that will allow us to get that information about the time. So I'm going to create a full property that is going to be datetime offset. The datetime offset type is going to have datetime data, but it's going to be relative to UTC. We are going to set this to be created at, which is the name that the database has in the column that we want to get. And of course, we are going to be calling the onPropertyChange method from here as well. And now we have the created ad property inside of the post table. Now I am going to open the history page. Currently in the history page we have a text cell that is only displaying the experience. This time I want to also display the created ad property. And that I am going to display in the detail. So I am going to be binding to that property. In fact, I am going to test this on the simulator. I am going to log in with one user that already has some posts, and the posts are going to be retrieved, and this time they should also have the created ad property assigned to them. And here we hit the breakpoint that I had set, and I can explore the values inside of the posts. And you can see how indeed the created ad property has some value. We can see that it's from 2017 and the month is the 9th month, which is September. And we have the day, which was the 26th. So this has a date of 26th of September 2017. And of course, the rest of the items should also have a created ad value. But if I click on continue and I take a look at what is inside of the list, I'm going to see that the detail is not being displayed. Now that is because we are not setting any format for this. One of the ways in which you can set a format is heading back to the history page, and after setting the binding, you have a string format. And we can add some single quotes, and in here, like we've done before, I am going to set 0, write colon, and in here I could set the format that I need. For example, I could write D, which is going to set a short format for the date. And if I run this again, that is the format that is going to be specified. So after logging in, you can see how now the detail is being set and we have a short format for the date. And this is okay, this is very straightforward. This is being set to a date. And this may be from a few days ago. But if I add another element, with some random experience and some random element, and I head back, this is the latest element, and this should say at least like 1 minute ago, 30 seconds ago, or today, and it says a date. And this may not be the best experience. So here is where the I-value converter interface starts to be useful. What we are going to do is open the view model folder, and instead of the view model folder, add a new folder. And this is going to be the folder for the converters. And instead of the converters folder, I am going to add another class. The way you name converters should tell you immediately what the converter does. For example, this one is going to convert a datetime object into a string. So it's a good idea to name this converter datetime to string converter, like this. And this class should also be public, and it is going to implement the I-value converter interface. I have to add a using directive to xamarin.forms and to implement the interface. And these are its two members, the convert and the convert back. Of course, these aren't going to have just one type. These are actually object types. Object as the value that we're going to receiving, object as the value that we're going to be returning, object as the value for the parameter. We can also have some other information like the target type and the culture information. Right now, with the value and the object that we're going to be returning is going to be just fine. We're going to be binding this to one value, and that is the one that is going to be received through the value argument. Let me first add the functionality for the convert method. I will have a string that is going to be called time ago, and that is going to be initialized as an empty string. And after making some evaluations, this is the value that I want to return, time ago. In the middle is where I want to make certain evaluations, so I set the correct value to time ago. For this, I'm also going to need how much has passed from the value that I'm receiving to right now. And the value that I'm receiving in this case should be a datetime offset. So I'm going to define a datetime offset variable that I'm going to set to datetime, and that is going to be equal to the value set as datetime offset, like this. And then I will need the datetime offset for right now. So I will define another datetime offset that is going to be right now, and that is going to be to datetime offset dot now. The now property, as you may have guessed, contains all the information, date and time for right now. And then we have to get the difference. We're going to define a variable that is going to be difference, and it's going to be equal to right now minus datetime. And this is going to contain information about how much has passed from one time to another in seconds, in minutes, in hours, and even in days. And that is going to be enough. What I want to do first is if the difference total days is greater than 1. So if the total days is greater than 1, I am going to return the datetime, which is the value that we are receiving in the first parameter, with the same format that we just set inside of the history page. So that is going to be a format that will receive first that datetime, :D. And this is what is going to be returned. So it's going to have the same format that we just set from SAML. If it isn't, then we're going to make a bunch of evaluations. We can start by evaluating if the differences total seconds is less than 60. This means that not even a minute has passed. In this case, we're going to return a string that will contain the amount of seconds. So we can pass first the differences total seconds, and after this set seconds ago. So if there have only passed from 0 to 59 seconds, we're going to set that as that amount of seconds, seconds ago. Then we can make the evaluation for the minutes. If the total minutes is less than 60, means that less than an hour has passed, we're going to return also a string that this time is going to contain the amount of minutes. And we're going to set minutes ago. Then the same thing for the hours. If the total hours is less than 24, meaning less than a day has passed, we're going to return as a string the amount of hours that have passed. And finally, if none of these criteria is met, it means that the total days is 0 or 1, and that it has been less than 24 hours. So I am just going to return yesterday. And well, I've been returning the string itself when we were supposed to set the time ago, but let's get rid of that time ago variable, and the functionality is complete. And when it comes to the convert back method, we're actually not going to be using it. And this is going to be very common. In most of the scenarios, you will be converting to the view, but not from the view. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to have some functionality in here, but all I'm going to do is return a datetime offset of now. If we ever need to convert from the view back to the model, here is where we want to do that. So back in the history page, we have to define that converter. We're going to be doing it first by adding a new namespace. So I am going to define a new XML namespace that is going to be called converters, and that is going to be pointing to converters. More specifically, the one that comes from the local namespace and not the one that comes from JSON or from newtonsoft.json, but the one that comes from travelrecordapp.viewModel.converters. Having this namespace inside of the content page, I will need to define the resources. And remember that for this, we need to also define a resource dictionary. Inside of the resource dictionary, I am going to define a new converter of type datetime to string converter, and this will have a key, and the key is going to be set to converter. Back in the detail for the text cell, we are going to get rid of the string format, but instead, we're going to be defining the converter. And in here, we're going to be binding to static resource converter, which is the static resource that we had just added to the resources for the current content page. And that's it. We can go ahead and try this out. And this time, the value is still going to be binding to the created add property, but now it is going to use the converter itself. The property is going to be passed as the value that we have been using in the convert method, and the corresponding values, the strings that we defined, are going to be returned. So let me first log in. I get navigated, and notice that the first 4 elements do have the same format that before because more than a day has passed, but this one that I just added almost 49 minutes ago is set to that amount minutes ago. Now this of course is not the ideal. You may want to round this up without any decimals, but this is working. What is happening in here is that these 4 elements have a date time from before yesterday, so the entire format is set. This one was evaluated as something that has happened less than 60 minutes ago, so it is set as minutes ago. But it has also passed more than 60 seconds ago, so it is not set as seconds ago. Now, let me get rid of those decimal points by heading back to the converters, and instead of returning the entire total seconds, total minutes, and total hours, I am going to set a format by adding colon and just a 0. This will make sure that the values are being set without any decimals. So if I try this again, I should now just see 48 or 49 minutes ago instead of the format with many decimal points. So after logging in, I can see that. Now it's set to 51 minutes ago. And if I go ahead and add a new element and save it and immediately head back, when it is read, it's actually set to -1 seconds ago. And as I move from tab to tab so it is refreshed, you can see how it moves to 24 seconds ago, 27 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago, etc. You get the idea here. So we have now successfully implemented the I-value converter interface. In the next lecture, we're going to talk about the last type that is going to allow us to move some of the code that we still have in the code behind back to the view model. And that is the observable collection class.